August 30th, 2023. It's dark. The water's choppy off the coast of Malaysia, and a totally routine pilot transfer is about to go horribly wrong. Today, we're going to dig into the official casualty report to understand how a standard, everyday procedure ended up being fatal. And it all started with just a single sound.
This one sentence from the report, it just drops you right into the middle of it. Think about it. It's just after midnight, the pilot's on board the gas carrier Eco Galaxy, everything's good. You think the job's done, right? And then a scream just cuts through the darkness.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? How did something so routine turn fatal? We're not talking about some massive storm or a ship collision here. This is a task that happens thousands of times every single day all over the world. So, what happened on this ship? Let's follow the investigation and see what they found.
All right, so before we can get to the why it happened, we have to piece together what happened. Those first few minutes of a man overboard, they are absolutely critical. And in this case, they were just a mess of confusion and a really desperate but ultimately failed rescue attempt.
Okay, just look at this timeline. At 5 past midnight, everything is completely normal. A couple of minutes later, total chaos. The third officer tosses a life buoy, the pilot boat rushes in, and one of their crew members actually jumps into the water to try and help. A brave move, for sure, but also incredibly dangerous. But here's the real kicker, the miscommunication. A few minutes later, the pilot boat radios that their crew member is back on board. The bridge team on the Eco Galaxy hears this and thinks, great, they rescued our guy. But they didn't. It took another 6 minutes, 6 critical minutes, for them to realize the able seafarer was still missing in the water.
So, a full search and rescue operation gets underway, but it was just too late. 2 days later, they recovered the body of the able seafarer. Just a tragic end to a situation that went from normal to fatal in a matter of seconds.
So to really figure out how this could have happened, investigators had to rewind. They had to look at everything, the ship itself, the weather conditions, the crew member, all of it. They needed to build a complete picture of what was going on that night.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The Eco Galaxy. It's a pretty modern gas carrier, just over 110 meters long. But the really important number here is the freeboard. The deck was about 2.7 meters. That's roughly 9 feet above the water. Now that's a serious fall, don't get me wrong, but it's not so high that a rescue would be impossible.
Now, the conditions, they were definitely challenging, but nothing a professional crew hadn't seen before. It's the middle of the night, visibility's not great because of squalls, you've got a force 5 wind whipping up, creating these meter-high waves, and here's another key detail, the ship's speed, 8 knots. That might not sound super fast, it's about 9 miles an hour, but it's more than fast enough to leave someone in the water far behind very quickly.
And this is the spot. This is where it happened. See, this wasn't a fall off some tall, shaky ladder. It was a fall right off the deck through an opening in the railing that was only secured by a couple of chains. The investigators are pretty sure he fell while he was trying to put those chains back in place right after the pilot got on board.
So who was the crew member? Well, he was a 57-year-old able seafarer, a real veteran with almost 14 years of experience at his rank. Now, the report brings up 2 medical points. He had hypertension, but it was under control with medication. The other thing, though, was that he was taking a pain reliever called diclofenac, and he hadn't declared it. And one of the potential side effects of that drug is vertigo. Now, the investigators couldn't say for sure that this caused the fall, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle you can't ignore.
And this is where we get to the real heart of the investigation, because this wasn't just about a simple slip and fall or even a medical issue. The report points to something much deeper, something systemic, a safety culture where taking risks had just become normal.
This is the question that just cuts through all of the noise, right? Why was this veteran, a 57-year-old seafarer, working right next to an open railing on a moving ship in bad weather without a life jacket? Every single part of that is a huge red flag, and yet the most basic piece of safety gear was nowhere to be seen. You just have to ask why.
And the answer, it seems, is in that classic gap between the official procedure and what people actually do. The company's safety manual couldn't be clearer. It says a personal flotation device, a life jacket, should be used. But what was the reality on deck that night? Neither the seafarer nor the third officer supervising him was wearing one.
The investigation actually gives this a name. They call it risk normalization. And it's this kind of psychological trap that you see in a lot of high-risk jobs. Basically, you do a dangerous thing over and over and over again, and nothing bad ever happens.
So your brain just starts to think of it as normal and safe. That's when complacency kicks in, and that's when you start skipping the safety checks. So how does that normalization happen? Simple. Repetition. Check out this number, 27. That's how many times the Eco Galaxy had done this exact same pilot transfer in this exact same spot in just the last year. I mean, it was the absolute definition of a routine job. And this is so important. It wasn't just one guy making a mistake. It was a whole pattern of complacency. This job was so routine that they didn't even talk about it in the daily safety meetings. The official risk assessment, it was all about keeping the pilot safe on the ladder, but it barely mentioned the crew on deck. And maybe worst of all, nobody on the bridge, the command center of the whole ship, nobody noticed or said a word when the crew went out there without their life jackets. It was a failure of the entire system. So after this tragedy, both the company and the maritime authorities really had to focus on making sure this kind of thing never ever happens again. So let's take a look at what they learned and the changes they made.
The management company, to their credit, took some pretty major steps. They kicked off new safety campaigns across their whole fleet, they went back and updated their procedures, and they ramped up the training and the drills. But I think the most important thing they did is that last one. They actually hired an outside group to come in and evaluate their entire safety culture. That's a direct response to that whole risk normalization problem.
The official report from the Marshall Islands Maritime Administrator wrapped up with two big recommendations. For the company, the message was blunt. Just follow your own rules. Have the meetings, do the risk assessments, and make sure your people are wearing their safety gear. Simple as that. The report also pointed a finger at the local authorities, saying that the pilot boat didn't have the right rescue equipment or a crew trained for water recovery, which is why that rescue attempt was so chaotic and dangerous.
And really, that leaves us all with one last, really critical question to think about. The story of the Eco Galaxy is just a tragic reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing you do is the thing you've done 100 times before without a problem. It really forces all of us, no matter what our job is, to stop and ask ourselves, where in my own work has routine become a risk?